Okay. Looks like we're good to go. I think of having more success on this one. Let's see if my guests will be joining me here in a moment as well. And in the meantime, okay. All right. Talk. Let me
Yeah,
see if I
looks
can
like
hear
it.
you.
Can you hear me? All
Yeah,
good?
it's not coming through. Of course it's not coming.
Oh, oh no. Yeah, 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 sure. Yeah. Can you hear me? Sweet. Yep.
Hey, so here we are. Another episode of The Profit Architect. Welcome. My name is Eric. And as you can tell, I'm still working on my setup. I'm here joined again with Nick. And today we're talking tariffs and how you can actually make a lot of money, even though everybody wants to scare you into thinking that that's not possible. So I'll start off. Just asking you this, Nick. Nick, do you know what tariffs are?
I would not be able to break it down.
Yeah.
Basically, just yeah,
Well, in its
I get the
simplest,
gist of it, but I'm not great at, you
yeah.
know, technically explaining it, so I leave that to you.
Well, I won't get too much into the technical because I'm sure there'll be somebody somewhere out there who's like, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll just use the simplest term, which is a tax, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, it's a tax that's levied on goods that come in from wherever we're tariffing. So if we're importing something and we have a tariff on those goods, we tax those goods. What most business owners do is they pass that tax on to the consumer, right? Just like, hey, we're going to give fast food $15 an hour, and then all of your burger prices shoot up to $12 a burger, right? Like the company could pay for it, but they don't want to. So this is very much the same thing. The countries that are sending goods to us, they could eat the cost. They wouldn't make as much, but they could sell their goods at the same price and they would just eat that additional cost. But most of them, and in the case of most, it's like all of them, just say, well, we're just going to charge you. And that is a little point of understanding because you'll see a lot of talk of them being like, oh, it's only hurting you guys. Well, only if you pass the cost on to us, right? It's because that's where they say, oh, it's an additional tax. Because they're not wrong when they say it's a tax, but it's you have to understand how it now works, right? So that's a base understanding it's a tax. So the question is, why would we want to tariff goods that are coming into our country? Well, it does a couple of things. What it does is because the cost of those goods go up because most countries are dumb, just like our country. I'm not going to say we're any smarter, but it's those businesses, right? They just pass the cost on to the consumer. And so when you have a choice between two options, something more local that isn't taxed as heavily or something that is taxed heavier that's foreign, you end up buying elsewhere. And it doesn't mean it's local. It could be anywhere else that maybe has a lower tariff or something like that, right? So this ends up hurting the other country an additional step because you have people buying less goods. And then you also have people searching out alternatives. So if there ever comes a point in time where those tariffs go away and people are used to the alternative, they won't necessarily go back. So you end up losing it, which is why a lot of the countries will like respond quicker. They won't necessarily wait and just sort of let the tariff sit around. Now, specifically when it comes to the US, if you actually look at what a lot of Trump has done is he's just implemented reciprocal tariffs, which a lot of people like, they just say, oh, he's just tariffing. No, what he's doing is other countries are tariffing the crap out of our stuff. And he's saying, okay, we're not tariffing you, but you're tariffing us. So we're just going to, whatever you're doing, we're going to do. Right. I know it's not all countries like China. There's a different, he has different, and I think like some stuff in Canada, Mexico because of political pressure. But for the most part, all these countries are just like they're taxing our goods, which is why we still sell a bunch of stuff, but not nearly as much as we could because their local markets can compete better than we can. So you put a reciprocal tariff on them, and it's like we're not penalizing them. We're just saying, well, if you're doing that to us, we're going to do it to you. Like, that's basically it. Now, I know there's more at play here because some countries can handle, that, some can't, some like they need another way of generating revenue or whatever. Like, I understand there's more nuance, but in the simplest form, that's that. So there's this funny video. I can't quite find it now, but if you look at it, after, Trudeau wept and was like, I'm so sad. There's this video of like in Canada of these people going around and they're like taking all the Hennessy off the shelves. It's like the Jack Daniels and the Hennessy's coming off the shelves, right? And they're like boxing it up. Besides the fact that this is just beyond idiotic, like if you're in Canada and you're doing this, just stop, because you already paid for the goods, right? Taking it off your shelf now doesn't actually do anything besides hurt your own business, because you've already paid for the goods. Like, it's not going to get taxed again. You've paid for it already. But if you're savvy, so if you're in a country that allow you to do this and you see this happening, you know what I would do? As I would call all the businesses and I would buy that alcohol for like pennies on the dollar. Because who knows, they're probably just going to throw it out or something stupid like that. Be like, hey, I'll buy all this inventory off of you. And then I would wait like a week or two. And then I would sell it for less than how much they could get it elsewhere, if at all. Because there is that thing, like, people will start to want something when they can't get it. So not only did I just buy a boatload of American products that you cannot buy at that price anymore, I'll be also the only person in the area who has it to sell it, right? And I know it's alcohol, so that's one thing, but I'm sure they're doing it with more than just like, and I don't know how the laws work in Canada, so I don't know if you could actually do something like that. But like that, if it was happening here and I had a liquor license, I'd do that. If I saw people just idiotically throwing out, I'd be like, oh, let me buy it from you. Like, don't take a loss on it. I'll buy from you for this much or whatever. And then I would, I'd make so much money from that, which is why I was like, that's idiotic. But outside of that, so we have that happening. We also have deregulation for lumber. Did you hear about this?
A little bit, yeah.
So there, apparently one of the reasons why like a plank of wood costs so much here in the US is because of all of the regulations and steps. I don't know exactly, but they put on a lot of extras that made it difficult to get. So it's like there was all these things they had to do, which jacked the price up. So remember, I was like, you get a 2x4 for like 50 cents, and now it's like $8. It's like, what? So yes, the price of gas has driven that up, but also all these regulations. So Trump has come out and removed all those regulations, right? So when you have something that's like, and I'll get to how this can actually help people like make money in a moment here, but it's just sort of like looking at everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. So you have these tariffs, and then you have you have like Canada doing this thing where they're like, we're not going to sell these goods in America anymore. It's like, okay, like that, as I said earlier, it only ends up really hurting you because if people find alternatives and then you open the trade routes open again, they're not going to go back to you because they've already like established a different brand. Oh, I can't get this, so I'll just buy this thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So you have these things getting cut off. You have these prices going up on these other products, which is why Trump was like, it's going to hurt for a little bit. He's like, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but then it'll be fine. And then it'll be fine comes from the hundreds of billions of dollars of manufacturing that's coming back to the US. So you have like car manufacturers, we have chips, so computers are about to get real cheap again, which is nice. You have like all of this infrastructure. Apple's building their next iPhone factory here in the US. You know what I mean? Like they're coming out of China, building it here in the US. So it's like, okay, the iPhone may cost a little bit more, but it won't feel like it'll shatter the moment you hold it funny, which will be kind of nice. Like, and then we're going to be using American steel instead of Chinese steel. And I don't know if you ever noticed, I noticed this. It's kind of a weird thing to notice. I noticed this on ice cream scoops. So ice cream scoops used to always be metal. And when I was younger, one of my first jobs, I was working like a Friendly's restaurant or something. They were known for ice cream, and their ice cream scoop was metal. Never had a problem. Chink, 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 right? No issues. A couple of years ago, I go to buy ice cream scoop. I can't find any metal ones. It's all like Chinese, half plastic, half metal, which is like, okay. And it would last like 2 months, and then it would like shatter because it's plastic and crappy metal. So like you would use it on hard ice cream and the thing would just explode because the plastic couldn't handle the pressure. Like you make ice cream scoops and it can't handle the ice cream. So we ended up having to find one from like, I think Germany or something like that had like real steel. No problems with it. We put it through hell and it's been like amazing. And it's like, okay, but it's not, we had bought one that was like all metal, but it was like Chinese brand or China made or whatever. And it just fell apart, like bent. And it was like, useless. So it's like, okay, there's like a minimum threshold, I think, that they get away with. I don't know. I'm not in Chinese manufacturing, but there's something they're doing that's causing it to be really crappy.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so if we have American steel and we have, more focus on that being used in products, we have more manufacturing here. We have, you have this increase of jobs. So you're going to have all of these jobs coming in. They're going to be nicer paying jobs. You're going to have more money. So like a lot of people that I've talked to, it's like it's hard to get customers. They don't have as much money. Like it's tight. And it's like, yeah, because there's nothing here in the US that generates that kind of revenue for people because all those jobs are gone, but they're all coming back. That's why I keep telling people, I'm like, you got to write it out. You got to make it through this year because then all these jobs will be in, all this money will start coming. Things will get cheaper or easier to get a hold of or whatever. I don't even want to get into the whole they murdered 1 million chickens thing. That's a topic for a different time. But it's like, okay, so what does this mean if you're thinking about being in business or you're in business? Now, I realize there are some things that you may purchase if you're a local business that it's going to hurt because the price is going to go up. My suggestion would be to look somewhere in the community to see if somebody does it. It tends to be a little more tricky, but what I would say is, depending on what it is, if you can't find it locally or here in the US, see how much it would cost for you to manufacture it. Because a lot of times people think it's a very expensive thing, but banks lend out money for manufacturing machines like all the time. Is a very common thing. Like it's one of the most common things you can find out about. If you look at lending, they always use like manufacturing and machines and output for like their pricing structure. I don't know if they still do, but that's a big one for them. And if you're like, hey, here's this thing, it costs this much to import it from elsewhere. All of these businesses here in the US use it. I need this many machines set up so I can create it myself. And I have all these clientele, which wouldn't be hard to call around and say, hey, you need this, I need this too. If you found it, no, okay. Would you buy it from me if I manufactured it? And you could just have like a list of customers willing to pay you. If you're savvy on the phone, you could get them to pre-order. Hey, bulk order your next couple of whatever with me. Give me the money for it. I'll give you a discount on it. So they're buying it at cost basically, but it's helping you fund your acquiring of the equipment and your first set of materials. And now you've taken your business, which needed something, and you've added on a side business where multiple businesses in the US need it. And then you don't have to worry about those tariffs and those things like that. I realized, like I said, I know there's more nuance to it, but if you start looking at it that way, it can become a lot easier. Like one of the biggest things I always tell people who are in e-commerce is, are you buying your products from China? And the answer is always yes. And I say, can you buy it from anywhere else? And a lot of times they say, why? And I'm like, outside of the fact that it's from China, China's on the other side of the world. So whenever you order something, it takes forever to get here. So is there anywhere else that's closer that you can order from? Additionally, like if they take a month off, and like at the time I knew like stuff was happening. I'm like, if they get mad at the US, what are you going to do? If they decide they're not going to send any of their goods to the US or whatever, then what? You're kind of screwed. So like you got to have these backups in mind, but that's something you can look at.
Mm-hmm.
So outside of that, you have to look at these tariffs as an opportunity of like, okay, what are some of the things that's going to be harder for people to get that I can either set up shop for or that I can reach around and get some pre-orders for? But there's an even more basic understanding of something that happened there. But that's like where I would start. I would start there, right? The next thing I would look at is in the last couple of years, outside of Amazon and eBay, Etsy has been crushed. And what I mean is a bunch of the sellers have left Etsy. And the reason why they've left Etsy is because Etsy was like, open the doors for Chinese sellers. So if you sold something on Etsy, a lot of times 52 Chinese suppliers would come in, sell the same product you do for like $1 and just flood the market. And you had no way of actually generating any sales. And there's a lot of discussion if you look at about like people who just abandoned the platform because they weren't very helpful. If you're like, hey, these guys are stealing my product, they didn't really care too much. And on top of that, those guys could raise flags against you. And when you have like 52 other companies flagging you and there's just you, a lot of times they give you the boot, right? But they could do this because there was something that was implemented. I don't know, I forget what it was, but basically it was, it's like no additional fees on really small packages, which allowed like the Alibaba and the AliExpress to really boom. Because they could make a widget for $2 and you could sell it, and there was like no shipping fee. You're talking about sending it from the other side of the world. So even though people were like, yeah, you wait a little while, but there's prices like non-existent. Trump repealed that. So it doesn't matter how small the package is. Now there's additional fees on it. So now are you going to really save yourself 50 cents and wait 8 more weeks to get something that you could get here in a couple days for like 2 quarters more? right?
Yeah.
So that's huge, and I don't think that's really that's really well understood by the people who are thinking about doing Etsy or selling on Amazon or whatever. Is that these sellers that sort of destroy these marketplaces have a big hurdle. Now, it doesn't mean they're all gone right away. It takes a while for the effects to come in place. A lot of them set up warehouses here in the US, so they already have like a stockpile. But it's one of those things to look at and be like, okay, these smaller markets that I was in are more viable. And then it's like, if you look at the fact that lumber is going to get cheaper, you can have a lot of these small handy craft people come up, which I know there's a few products out there. It's like how to use wood to make like 52 different types of products and sell them. And before it may not have been as feasible because the cost of wood was so much. And it's like, you need that first. But it's like, if the cost of wood drops, the number of sellers drop, and your ability to produce this, and there's nobody else really around who can sell it at the price that you can sell it at, because now you're rewarded for being in the US instead of punished for it. You can easily take over some markets, right? So, and that's why it's like, yeah, you could look at tariffs and be like, oh, it's this horrible thing. And I realize, like I said, I realize there's larger stakes at play. And there is something to be said about the whole like global economic whatever doohickey of it all. But then there's also like, okay, so I could sit here, like I usually tell people, you can go outside and you can scream at the sky about how unfair everything is and how horrible it is. Or you can try and look at it and be like, how can I take this situation to my advantage while everybody else is outside screaming at the sky? Right? Like you flip through, I don't know anybody who watches TV, but I imagine if you flip through TV, it's like half or more of the people are just yelling at the sky while there's like a reasonable person being like, I'll wait till your turn's over, then I'll start yelling at the sky, right? And then they have like, every once in a while, somebody just yells evil Trump or evil Elon, and then they move on to yelling at the sky some more. That's all it ever seems like to me. I'm like, this is helpful.
Yeah.
You know? Thoughts?
No, I mean, you covered it. That made a lot of sense, though. Yeah. Especially when it comes to, yeah, incentivizing. It's actually more of an incentive to use, American goods and whatnot, in regards
Yeah.
to the tariffs and whatnot. So, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I
always
would just
there's
start
always
looking at
other
the,
angles to, yeah, like when people are just shouting, it's always take a step back and, yeah,
yeah,
then you can actually
like
figure it
look
out.
at it and be like, where can you make some money in that? And I don't mean like, you're not doing something that would be predatory, right? You're not
Yeah.
looking at it like, hey, how can I get the jump on these people or take advantage of them? You're not doing that. All you're really doing is looking at it and say, hey, there's a need, can I fill it? Which in a sense is predatory, but you're not doing it out of malice, you're doing it out of help. So it's one of those things where it's like, instead of screaming about all these tariffs and I won't be able to get my Coronas and tacos or whatever that idiot senator was saying, right? I would look at it and be like, well, what's everything that's actually being tariffed? And how in demand is it? And how hard would it be for me to be able to get in on that? Right? To be able to like, it'll take some time for you to get up and running, but it also takes some time for the supply that's currently here to run out, especially if they're like, oh, I'm going to shut down. So there is like this middle ground. And the fact that I'm willing to bet, and that's the other thing I want to talk about, which is like on YouTube, if you were looking around for easy like arbitrage money, there was a lot of videos, like lots of videos that are like, here's how you can use like the US Gov site to make money. And it was like, you look for the open contracts, you find one, you put in the highest bid that you think you can get the contract with. If you get accepted, you just go find a person who can do the job and you try and get them to do it for the lowest amount of money possible, pocket the difference, right? It's just arbitrage. It's not necessarily a bad idea.
Yeah.
It really isn't a bad idea. But it's one of those things where if you have to look at it now and you know that Doge is just like slicing the crap out of everything, chances are that kind of thing is going to go away, right? To that level. The ability to have an arbitrage where you're making $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in a month from like finding that one job and securing it, it's probably going to go, because they're really trying to clamp down, right? But at the same time, that's one of those things where you can look at it and, scream at the sky, or you can look at it and say, well, where are they opening things up? Because not all of it's going to disappear. Like, sure, a lot of the waste is going to go away. And I'm sure that they had like tons of grant money that was just like floating about to do whatever, not really caring about the cost. But I'm sure there's going to be some sectors that are like I said, like I'd have to look and see, are they going to do something for the local businesses in the US that want to open up a manufacturing thing? Maybe they give them very favorable loan terms. Maybe they help, you know what I mean? Like there's probably a bunch of boons that'll come for the person who goes looking for them. And it's just a matter of looking at it. So instead of just like looking at it and being like, oh, these things are horrible and they're taking away all this crap, be like, well, where is some of this shifting to? Like most of it's getting cut, which is fine. But it's like there's still going to be some there. You just got to look for it and be like, okay, if I want to set up shop, instead of just going directly to the bank, is the US government doing something to make it more favorable for somebody to start a manufacturing plant? Like, do they make it easier to get a building? Do they make it easier to do whatever? Like, there's some sort of regulations or restrictions that I'm sure were eased. And if you go looking for it, why not get ahead of it instead of behind it? At some point in time, it'll all normalize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. The tariffs will either come down or they'll be the same, or other countries will be like, oh, okay, we'll reduce our tariffs so it's not as painful. You know, it's a 10% increase is like a couple pennies versus like a couple quarters. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, why not take advantage of it now? Don't wait until like you start looking around. Everybody has these jobs, manufacturing plants. Then there'll be other ways to make money, right? But it's like, why not be there? You know, have a small, even if it's something small. Like you can get a couple manufacturing machines in a garage if you have a garage.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's ways to get it, and that's easy money. You know, I don't need to find a market, because you just look and see like, here are the products that are getting penalized. Then you look at the businesses that it hurts the most, and then you're like, is there something I can do?
Yeah. You just gotta look.
Even if it's only like, could you be a middleman and find a country that isn't as heavily tariffed to source the products from, and just get a warehouse, and then you buy the products and sell it. That's also very viable, because like people don't like change. They're not going to go looking. A lot of them won't. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh no, I can't get my syrup from Canada for whatever reason, so we'll get it from Vermont. But if like Vermont syrup goes up, it's like, what do I do? Like, I don't know, find out the tree that makes syrup and plant a few. Like, because I don't know how long it takes to grow them, but like if you have the land and you throw some up, like you'll have syrup soon enough.
Yeah.
It's like the Christmas tree people, right? Like some people, their whole business is just growing Christmas trees and selling them. Like, guess what?
Yeah.
It takes longer than a year for a tree to grow. So they started it at some point. Like, start it, and then you have this like running track. Like, yeah. The best part is you don't have to worry about the syrup mafia or whatever they got going on in there. There's like a Netflix documentary on it. It's hilarious. Check it out.
Hitman or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. But like there's a lot of opportunity in that sense of just being like, okay, like, yeah, this stuff is happening, but and the fact that so much is happening, like if you just pay attention to the news, you miss it all. But it's like, all right, if all this is ramping up, let me keep an eye on like how it's affecting business or what businesses are being affected, because they're not always going to make a news announcement about like, whatever this type of, papers going to be no longer distributed because it'll cost $15 a pound or something. But it's like there's probably a market in there somewhere. So I said it's easier if you are a business and you're like, this has gone up in price and it's unreasonable. Chances are you're not the only one. So you look around and you're like, hey, there's a supply, I've got some, but can I call all these people, get orders for locally, figure out like how much it'll cost me to produce it, and then go to a bank, be like, I already have payments, I already have materials, I just don't have enough money to buy the machines, I need a loan for it. Chances are you're good, right? Because they'll be like, okay, like, yeah, your numbers look good, you already have orders for it, sure, here you go. And it's not like, I imagine it's not like it was before where it takes like 3 years for them to build a manufacturing machine. They probably just like 3D print that shit now. They're probably just like, it's like there you go. They do that for so much. You know what I mean? Like, it's just done.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. So yeah, look around, look at your business and be like, what is it that I could profit off of? Or even like, if you don't have a business, go around and start looking. Look at where it's made. Like I said, the easy thing to do is go see what's being tariffed. What countries like Canada are like, we're not going to send any more of the X, Y, and Z products. To be like, they probably have a website somewhere. It's like, these are all the products we think are going to hurt people, so we're not selling them anymore. And it's like, you just go look. Be like, all right, where are these being used? Mm-hmm. And like, so instant business, yay! That's kind of like I pay a lot of attention to the gaming news, and it's kind of funny because all these we're in the East, all these Eastern, I don't know, all of our developers, they're shutting doors, right? Because they make the ugliest characters possible. They have the crappiest writers. And there's a whole reason for that, but like they just have horrible storytellers, horrible programmers, horrible everybody. So these games come out and they're just like a reeking pile of trash. And there's always somebody who's like, you have to love it, but like nobody does. And so they lose all this money and they spent like 10 years making this game. And then you have like, you have someone in Korea, South Korea, or China even. Japan's getting a little bit on the woke side, but they're still okay for now. But it's like you have these people in South Korea and China, they put out, their free games, or they put out like Black Myth Wukong or whatever, which, okay, it's a very pretty game. You know what I mean? Like it looks really good. From what I can tell, it looks like it's fun to play. It's like millions of people bought it, or something like 500 million or 200 million or something, like the day it got released. And then you have like the crap here where they're like, you have to buy it. And there's like 1,000 people, like maybe 15,000, something like that. But it's like, you look at those numbers and you're like, what? You guys took like 15 years to make this steaming pile of crap. They took like 3. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And a lot of it isn't, like when I look into it, it's because of all the policies and stuff, but it's like, yeah, that is making a product that you want your market to like, not making a product your market wants.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
that's a really good point.
But it's like that across the board. It's like, what is it that people are selling that people want that's going to get harder to purchase or sell because the price is going to go up, it's harder to buy. Can I just find those things and can I get them either elsewhere or produce them? Because I'm sure there when I ran my e-commerce store, I always had people from India knocking on my door like, hey, we can make this stuff. Like, it wasn't a bad option, like, because they can make it too. They just weren't as they didn't market as heavy as like the Alibaba and the AliExpress did when it first launched. But they would go into like the forums and they'd be like, we can make these products, like we just don't have a very fancy website for you to go to, but like we can make them, like get in touch with us. That works too.
Yeah.
So that's all I really wanted to cover. Unless you have any other questions or thoughts on tariffs.
No, I mean that was informative. That was definitely helped out. Understand that perspective and you know, just how things are not always, a bad thing. It can be a good thing. There's plenty of opportunity for you.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I'm sure next time I'll have something more exciting to talk about. Maybe I'll do something like how to actually identify a business you can start, or something like that. I always see those videos and I'm like, why do they do this?
Yeah. And then it has a course attached to it or something.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, everybody's got to make their money, but it always annoys me when it's like 3 steps. They're like 3 easy steps. Like step 1, come up with the idea, which is like, okay. Step 2, super complicated, like 52-part course. Step 3, money. And it's like,
yeah,
that's
not how that works.
Yeah, that step 2 is a little tricky. Like I said, I'm not saying it's easy. Like even in my description, it's easy. I'm like, oh, just find a product people want and build a manufacturing plant and then profit. It's like, I realize there's more to it. That's why I'm like, it's more like you look. That's why it's like you get that middle part. It's like, what is it? How hard is it to make? Can I contact these people? Like all that stuff you can do. Contact them, see how much they order, how often they order, how many pieces they get. You already have your own business. See if you can't get a bunch of people to say yes. They may not send you money right away, but they're like, yeah, I'd order from you if you were able to. And then once you get enough people in, we're like, okay, I'll be able to produce like maybe 10,000 units a day or something like that. And you've got an order for like 200,000. So you're good for a couple weeks or a couple months or something like that. And then you get the orders and you go to the bank and you're like, hey, I won't cash this unless the bank says yes. So it's just like, if the bank says yes and I can get the manufacturing equipment, you guys will be the first ones out the door. And like I said, I realize there's a little more nuance to that, but that'll get you fairly far. Yeah. And then it's like, then what do you need? Well, you need a place to put it and then warehouse and you got to import it short. But it's like, I'd rather you like break through the walls trying to get this to work and you're just like stumbling like a drunk guy who's the Hulk who's just like smashing into stuff. He's breaking around the house is starting to crumble, but you get out the other side and you're like, I made it, because you'll be like one of the only people who does it, whereas everybody else is like, I don't know, that looks complicated.
Yeah. And yeah, it's definitely better to just kind of fail forward and let it be rocky.
Yeah.
Just be stuck in tutorial mode and just, yeah, stuck. Not even going forward.
Cool. Well, that's all I
Yeah.
want to discuss. I'll end this podcast here. We won't do a 2-hour one today. Let's do a short one.
Just a quick one. The
Just a
next
quick one. Yeah. Thanks
next
for
one will
joining
be
me again. And anybody who's seen this or we'll see you later, thanks for watching. And I'll catch you guys later. All right. Yeah. And now they're all off. I don't know if they actually went live on when I went, they all said green and it said green here.